Hello, and welcome to episode 55 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of March 31st, 2025. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including the band world's own March Madness tournament wraps up. The U.S. Department of Education is bad at social media. Some thoughts about surreal performance venues. And I have a conversation with a relatively new friend. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. Back in episode 46, I made a wee confession about an issue of demographics about which I felt like I'd dropped the ball regarding who my trio section interview guests had been to that point. I'm the kind of odd person who looks at lists of things and says, okay, how many of this sort of person is on this list? For example, I post something on Facebook about band, it gets 24 likes, and I look at the list of people who liked it and wonder, how many non-band people liked that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 out of 24. Then I think about what in that post attracted their attention and interest enough that they appreciated something that was outside their usual areas of expertise. Meanwhile, I'm missing my bus, or the pot on the stove boils over, or something. So, those 9 weeks ago, I bemoaned the fact that most of my trio section guests had been, well, pretty Caucasian, and I felt like I should be working to rectify that. This week, well, take that wee confession, take all the references to people of color and such, do a massive find and replace, and change the references to female people, women. This podcast started out pretty well in that regard, but since roundabout last September, as I am informed by an application of my I wonder how many of this sort of person exercise, my guest list has not exactly gone boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. In my defense, as I've discovered what it's like to continually beat the bushes and try to schedule interviews, the order of guests and their demographics are probably at least as defined by who's available to record and when. At least I've liked to think so. But I've been inspired to remember back to late 2017 when the whole Me Too thing broke loose, and a whole lot of us menfolk were encouraged to take a hard look at how we've viewed women, referred to women, treated women, and that hard look made a lot of us realize that however well-behaved or well-intentioned we've wanted to be, or felt that we in fact were, lots of ingrained attitudes and behavior. Without getting too into the weeds about the specifics of some of the things I wrote at myself back then, it's kind of like the difference between being non-racist and being anti-racist. One of them looks pretty good on the surface. The other is much more likely to rise to whatever noble aspirations we've got. So, in the next couple of weeks, I will begin to address that, thanks in part to the vagaries of schedules, and who's got a moment to spare for a recording, yes, but hopefully with an eye toward intentionally working to rectify the undeniable empirical truth that I haven't conducted an interview with a female band person since the wonderful Carol Cox Forbes graced the podcast, and that was back in early December. It's been 15 weeks. Too long. Far too long. So, drag out your old Ventures drum corps videos, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Washington, D.C., and the Internet. With the slogan of 32 marches, 4 weeks, 1 champion, this month the United States Marine Band, the President's Own, hosted its annual Sousa's March Mania, a tournament pitting 32 musical marches against each other for voters to decide which one would be crowned the year's champion march. Marches competed head-to-head every weekday from March 3rd to 27th. The opening round featured online voting between March 3rd and 12th. Highlights included relatively easy victories for Semper Fidelis, American Patrol, and National Emblem. Whoever was setting the original competition brackets was clearly amusing themselves mightily, as there were first-round matches between the Marines Hymn and Song of the Marines, March of the Leathernecks and March of the Belgian Parachutists, Guide Right and Right Left, and Over There and They Are There. 2 marches by John Williams were included in this year's brackets and drew each other in the opening round. March from 1941 defeated the Midway March, 3,307 votes to 2,811, and this reporter was frankly disappointed. The Colonel Bogey March lost to the Black Horse Troop by nearly 4,600 votes out of a total of more than 12,800 cast. It was the second year in a row that Colonel Bogey has been blown out, no doubt leading to rumors that its head coach may be sacked. And in what might be seen as something of a sign of the times, the March of the Women Marines lost to a march called Sons of Uncle Sam, 7,026 votes to 2,922. The round of 16 was the scene of a pair of near upsets of Marine Corps melodies as Semper Fidelis held off American Patrol 4,960 votes to 3,752, and the Marines hymn edged Bullets and Bayonets by just 50 votes, 4,292 to 4,242. Both of those winners eventually advanced to the Final Four, as did Sound Off, which finished off March of the Leathernecks by 2,564 votes to just 788. The last spot in the Final Four was reached by John Williams' March from 1941, as it ended the Black Horse Troop's Cinderella tournament, 2,120 votes to 1,846. The Final Four saw a pair of exceptionally close contests. The Marines hymn defeated Sound Off by 130 out of 13,080 votes cast, and Semper Fidelis beat the March from 1941 by just 95 votes out of 13,135 cast. The 2025 March Mania champion, announced on Friday, March 28th, was the Marines hymn by a vote of 7,931 to 5,781. Once again this year, I could not break through the mass of legacy media reporters to get a post-match interview with this year's champion, but I definitely would have asked about the fact that either way, the tournament would have produced a Marine Corps-related winner in this, the 250th anniversary year of the United States Marine Corps. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Now let's take a quick break to hit the showers. And on the other side of that, I will not comment myself. I'll let the internet do the talking. And oh, does it ever. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, it's rare to find a government agency, a company, a nonprofit organization, a church, a school, a musical ensemble, even a book or a song that doesn't have some kind of internet presence. Every so often, I go looking for something online and I don't find any websites or videos or anything posted online that would suggest that it even existed, and I'm startled. And sometimes a little worried, like, did I just make that up inside my head? Of the vast majority of human-driven entities that do have internet locations, many of those are found on some form of social media platform, and if you monitor their social media sites for long enough, you will get a sense as to whether they are with it or tone deaf, whether they're getting engagement or just whistling in the wind, whether they're any good at this social media thing or not. And when they're not, the internet tends not to be kind to them. And now, the United States Department of Education has entered the chat, and it hasn't gone well. This past month of March was, and has been for some decades, Music in Our Schools Month. It's a month where music education is front and center, where the purveyors of that music education have virtual and actual bouquets tossed at them in gratitude for the work that they do, bringing music to students, bringing students to music, helping their students toward a more well-rounded and complete education through exposure to and the carrying out of artistic endeavors, specifically in the musical area. Lots of organizations commemorate this month with online posts and such, and special school music concerts are scheduled. Lots of concerts. So many concerts. On March 4th, well done in that detail at least, the U.S. Department of Education posted some text on its Facebook page, accompanying an image of a line of uniformed high school marching band students in performance. The text read thusly: "Strike up the band and step in time. It's hashtag March 4th. Here's to all the marching bands across the country and the students, teachers, parents, and schools who support them. Hashtag Music in Our Schools Month. Hashtag MIOSM." The comments section responded. And after I read and scrolled for a rather long time, I estimated that for every comment that thanked the department for its marching band well wishes, there were a dozen or more that, Well, I think that for the remainder of this second strain, I will just read you a selection of those online commenters' work. You may wish to get your fire retardant gear ready. That's all I'm going to say. First up, from a commenter named Barbara Guzman. "This is such a great highlight post of something that I'm sure will be taken from children first when the government starts cutting the funding." From a commenter named Jean Ann. "Some of my fondest memories of my public school education are marching with my school's marching band. A fully funded public school system provides quality education, a variety of extracurricular activities, and compensates teachers well for their hard work. As the data shows, music and art education are amongst the first programs cut when public school systems are defunded. Rather than celebrating with empty words and hollow actions, celebrate students by providing them a fully funded public school system." From a commenter named Wendy Frederico. "Band is one of the most inclusive programs in the schools. Thanks for highlighting this, since you seem so determined to get rid of all inclusivity in schools." From a commenter named Jennifer Fuller. "So band is great for all students, right? Even diverse students, maybe minorities, perhaps even LGBTQIA+ students could enjoy and benefit from band. Please continue to fund music classes for all our kids." From a commenter named Andy Pease. "Good job highlighting a genuinely nice thing. Fun fact, band is often a great haven for LGBTQ kids, and your other actions have made them deeply unsafe. If you support band, you support trans kids. Maybe you're starting to come around without even realizing it. Still, you might want to see a school counselor, or better yet, a band director, about those conflicted feelings." From a commenter named Irene Grunfeld. "I've started looking forward to these every day for the laugh. The irony is absurd. All students should clearly have equal access to the arts, black, brown, LGBTQ+, whatever immigration status." From a commenter named Vicky Van Heis. "You do realize music and other arts programming would not exist without the diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, the exact programming you've sought to remove and dismantle in schools. There is no music or arts without DEI." From a commenter named Patty Lammert. "Please actually support the arts in schools with adequate funding and the acknowledgement of the arts as part of the core curriculum. Posts are nice, but supportive action is better." From a commenter named Selena Matum. "Would really appreciate it if the U.S. Department of Ed would put their money where this post is. When's the last time federal education money was specifically allocated for school music and arts funding? Many states don't have the resources to provide these experiences. Pay the teachers, fund the programs, support the students. Then you can come back and post this. I'll wait." From a commenter named Alexandria Yvonne. "Music is a core science, and marching band is an important part of our culture. Your cuts will make it so that the fine arts would likely be cut anyway. Stop with the performative support." From a commenter named Carrie Nelson. "Wow, yippee, let's celebrate school bands and music programs. Except those programs need actual music educators. Trained arts teachers who, play instruments and can teach music theory and can lead orchestras and marching bands and school musical pit orchestras. This administration reminds me of a more sinister version of that famous con artist band leader, Professor Harold Hill from The Music Man. In fact, this post is kind of like Harold's Think system for learning music. Just think about school bands and post a pretty picture of one. And without money, teachers, or supplies, a school band will materialize. Yay!" From a commenter named Allison Gully. "Wait, didn't the DOE just say that education should exist only for kids to get jobs and learn to be patriotic? How does a post praising an arts program figure into your anti-education agenda?" From a commenter named Stephen Muller. "Is there someone at U.S. Department of Education that I can send my master's thesis on the unique position of music education to instill global perspectives and multiculturalism?" From a commenter named Andrew Sloniker. "Don't even try to say you support my discipline. You have failed me as an educator." From a commenter named Jimmy McKenzie. "Hi DOE, band director here. Quick question. Where did you find it? And by it, I of course mean the nerve to post this." And finally, a commenter named Rachel Roper posted a GIF, one of those tiny little animated images, with a caption that read, "Me laughing at U.S. Department of Education because they probably thought the comments would go differently." Now, I suppose that the Department of Education couldn't not post about this, and at least someone there was aware that March 4th has become a day to highlight the band world, so points for that. There was a Department of Education post later in the month that celebrated elementary music educators, and again, the commenters went largely scorched earth all over it. And I recognize that almost any time any well-meaning thing is posted online, the nature of the online world is that someone will make a snarky comment, even if the post is praising sunny days and fair skies. But, as their social media person put that cheerful post on Facebook, I wonder whether she or he had any idea just how pushy the pushback was going to be. I mean, considering everything and all. Anyway, on the other side of this next tiny break, things will get a little less cynical as I get to have a conversation with a relatively new friend of mine. Hope you'll stick around. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, I'm pleased to be joined by someone whom I first met about a year ago in a moment of gig. I was subbing in on second tenor, and she was next to me on the end on bari sax, and we were swinging out a little bit. This is going to be a week when it's safe to say we're going to make more mentions of UMass Lowell than UMass Amherst, and I suspect at some point there might even be bunny rabbit references, which would also be a first. Please help me welcome to the program Lauren SLIVA. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pleased you were able to come and do this. You're very kind to do it today, particularly.
Yeah, I've been grappling with what it's like, I guess, to try to go full steam ahead as a band director and just falling ill over and over and over again. Who can't relate to that, you know?
Yes, on the one hand, and on the other hand, let's just say, regardless of whether I was a music teacher or not, I have not had personal experience with the word that you dropped on me earlier today as we were kind of checking in and getting ready to set this up, which was migraine. So, long story short, you are very kind.
Thank you.
As is my usual, I will open this up with a few lightning round questions, which sometimes don't have lightning round answers, so that people can get a sense of who they're listening to. So first up, what is your primary instrument?
My primary instrument is tenor saxophone. I started off on alto, and then I always like to tell this story about my middle school band director sent around a clipboard one day and was like, okay, I need to find somebody who could play tenor and somebody who can play bari, but they have to have a big mouth. And I just sat there like, could it be me? I don't know. And I was picked out for it, and I've never turned back. I love tenor saxophone.
Was there a particular thing that hit you saxophonically?
Kind of. So when I was younger, I had a cousin who's 3 years older than me. Her name's Danielle, and she played saxophone at the time in her 5th grade band. And when I was younger, I was like, this is awesome. I want to be just like her. She didn't stick with it, but for me, it was the first thing that really stuck. I like to tell my kids that my school kids, I don't have real kids, but that I was enrolled in every sport that you could have thought of. And there was a reason that I just was not coordinated enough to do each and every one of them. And then finally, I got my saxophone and it clicked. And it was like, this is it. I'm good at school and saxophone. The other part of the story that I like to tell is I was watching some performance on TV. It must have been some award show. And I saw a tenor saxophone for the first time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to play the jazzy one. I did not know what that was at the time, but that I made it there.
So in your life, is there a laundry list of bands that you have been active with?
So I grew up in Peabody, and I was a part of the Peabody band system. And then when I was in high school, I was a part of a klezmer band.
Really?
Yeah. So myself and I have a friend, Sam Feinstein, who I adore. He's a bass player. And when we were 13 and 14, he was like, okay, I'm going to start a band. We're going to make money. We're going to do this. And I was like, okay, cool. Do you know anybody who plays other instruments? So he knew Amy and Jana Sokolow. Their father, Rich, is a recording musician. And so he was like, all right, I'm going to manage you guys. I'm going to get you guys with equipment. We're going to get you recorded, all that sort of stuff. So I did that until I was about 18. We did bat mitzvahs, we did weddings. It was just fun.
So not just an experiment, you went and played places.
Any festival you could think of, we were there. So then from there, was in the UMass Lowell band circuit, did the marching bands, did concert bands, as many jazz bands as I could get my fingers under. Oh, and sax quartet. I adore sax quartet. Post-college, which is more now in my life, I perform with a couple of big bands in the area. I rehearse with a jazz quintet up in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is a lot of fun. One thing I'd really like to get back into is playing in a concert band. I think that's the piece missing for me.
So what is your current role in the band world?
So right now I teach in Haverhill Public Schools. I'm a middle school band director, and I teach at the number kind of schools that I teach at. It depends who you ask how many schools I work at. In a week, I'm at 5 different schools, 4 middle school, and then 1 elementary school. And between myself and my colleague, Matt Lefton, we service all 5 of those schools. I'm in charge of scheduling and head band directing at 2 middle schools, 1 elementary, and then he's in charge of the 2 other middle schools in the area, or not in the area, but in the city. It's a huge undertaking. I'm just thankful that I get to do it with Matt, because he is so organized. It is crazy. He's a spreadsheet specialist, and it definitely keeps us afloat. Logistically, this job can be a nightmare in a lot of ways. Having somebody who I just know I can always rely on, it has been super helpful in the process.
Almost regardless of how many students there are, it's just a lot of ground to cover.
It's big. They redistrict every couple of years, and the community is constantly growing. So we see more and more families moving to Haverhill. It's an affordable place to be. When I started this job, we were at 7 schools. It was 4 middle, 2 elementary, and then 1 school that was just 4 and 5. And then they kind of blew that up and recondensed it. And so now it's the 4 middle schools plus 1 elementary, and hopefully that 1 elementary school, the 5th grade, is going to be at one of the middle schools, so it'll just be 4 next year. But and you see the scope of kids from all different walks of life throughout the city because of what happens to be 1 10-minute drive, for me, because I'm driving all over the city. You see the kids at one school that all of the kids can rent their own instruments, and then kids at another school where it's all school instruments that are provided to them. And thank God we can do that for them,
So the couple of challenges for you include, first, itinerant music teaching is always a party, and also a range of economic conditions, both for the kids and the schools, at least based on the school I got to see, which is a story that will come up.
That school, Constantino Middle School, I believe, that's the most Title I inner city school in Haverhill. I rehearse in a cafetorium. It's the best teaching space that I have in the district, which, if that says anything to you, it has its challenges. What I keep coming back to, I think, is like the kids that I have, since my program is completely pull out, the kids need to advocate for themselves to come out of whatever class that they're in, to come to their band classes that are organized in a schedule that doesn't necessarily line up with the school day, and they have to love it. There's nobody there in my ensembles who isn't just dedicated, wants to be there, huge heart. So I think that's the trade-off, is the monetary versus the just pure love.
For sure, in any situation, but I can imagine in that one, that could go a ways toward offsetting the challenges, to at least have a group of people that is desperate to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I got there, it was post-COVID. It was really rebuilding that program from the bottom up, in a lot of ways. My predecessor was there for a couple of years, and bless his heart, he was there through COVID and it going virtual, then ended up landing his dream job so I could land my first job that was a dream job. But now it's a realistic job. I teach at so many different schools and have seen so many different administrations in the 3 years I've been teaching at. I feel like I couldn't have possibly gotten more experience.
The job that I had that constitutes the bulk of my public school music teaching time was in the town of Uxbridge, Mass., which, long story short, is also a town with a range of economic conditions, family to family. Some of my beginner kids could afford everything. Others, well, more than one of my beginner brass and percussion kids came to me and said, "Mr. H, I can't practice." And I'd say, "Well, how can I help?" And they'd say, "I don't really know because the apartment building where I live has noise rules," which was a new one on me. But then I grew up in a house.
Right. And I see that all the time. The majority of my kids, I live in some sort of apartment. Some of them live in houses for sure, but the struggle of trying to give them a good place to practice is ongoing for sure. I would love to open up my space for the kids to practice during lunchtime, but lunchtime, my cafeteria becomes a cafeteria. And so they're trying to control those kids. Adding any extra noise to it, I just feel would be catastrophic. You should see the cafeterias. They're crazy pants.
I know right where you are. I taught beginner lessons on the other side of the stage curtain from 7th grade lunches. But at least when I was doing that, I was in the one single middle school in town. So the teachers knew where to find me, and I could establish a relationship with them that helped them fret less about pull-out lessons.
I've tried to make it a big thing with my kids that part of being in band in Haverhill is that your academics, you need to keep them in check. I like to say that this program only works if everyone's happy, and to keep everyone in the building happy, we need to make sure that you are doing well scholastically, that you are doing well musically. All of those things come together. It's a team endeavor. And I think what I've experienced most is it's really taken now 3 years for me to feel established at both of the schools that I spend the most amount of time at. The elementary school I'm at once a week, and then those kids come over to the middle school next door for their full band rehearsal. So my two main middle schools that I'm at, now the teachers have started to, they know me, they know they can come to me and speak to me if something's going on, and they understand that I'm reasonable about that kind of stuff. It stinks when you have a kid who is so passionate about band, and that's their thing that they really excel in, and maybe their academic life is a little bit more disorganized, and it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel equitable to not let that kid come and be in a part of our ensemble, you know? So there's been ups and downs, and I've definitely been having to grapple with, okay, well, obviously it's important that they're getting their tier 1 instruction, but band for a lot of them, that's the instruction for the heart. And that's their social and emotional place where they can be themselves and grow. What I do find is that my kids, when they come in 5th grade, sometimes they're, they've never had to really advocate for themselves before, but because they're doing band, they very quickly learn, like, okay, I need to stand up for myself. I need to be respectful about it. How do I communicate with my teachers to make this happen for me? And when they graduate 8th grade, they become a completely different person. And I really love seeing that, because they're their own, a leader in their own life,
The story that I definitely wanted to use to set the scene a little bit for that is just within the last couple of weeks. This past month, of course, was Music in Our Schools Month, which is a wonderful concept, unless you're a band director or a music teacher, in which case it gives you lots and lots of extra work to do to earn those accolades that are being thrown at you.
Yeah.
So you and I first crossed paths when I subbed in with the Silvertones Big Band in Tewksbury, and through that band I got connected with the Jerry T Big Band in Chelmsford. I show up to sub in at their rehearsal, and there you are on Barry as well. That jazz band got mixed up in a Music in Our Schools Month event, and I shall now pass the baton and have you tell the story of that gig.
This was the brainchild of myself, but also the leader of that band, George Condos, who I literally cannot say enough about. I love George so much. He's so sweet. What is he, like 84, 85, comes down from York Beach, Maine every single day of the week to come down to our area to go and practice with the band until 10 p.m. What does he do? Drive back, and he has a part-time gig, like doing janitorial work. Hopefully I make it to that age. And if I do, and I am anything like George, I'll be happy. What a testament to keeping music in your life throughout your life just keeps you sharp. That's such a beautiful thing. And like when I was playing with my klezmer band, we played for a lot of senior centers. And I think maybe now I'm just kind of putting in my head, like maybe that's where that I don't know. I played for that community. I love talking to people who are more experienced than me or more interesting than I feel I am. And I think the way to do that is to talk to people with more life experience than you. When I joined the big band circuit, and it was mostly people who are, they have way more life experience than I do, I felt like this is a treasure trove. This is awesome. I love these people. Anyway, so it was George. George was like, I would love to do something since you're a band director with your jazz band. And my first year I was in the band, I wasn't running the jazz band. It was my colleague, Matt. And then he and his wife had a new daughter. And he was like, I immediately cannot do this. I now have 3 children and one is under the age of 1. It's yours. And I was like, heck yeah. I'm so passionate about jazz. I love jazz music. So anyway, I was like, George, you know what? Let's do it. Haverhill's budget for band is a big goose egg. It is 0, at least at the middle school level. And so we scrounge around for money for repairs from the high school. Anything else that we have, it's like, well, I hope you like fundraising,
Yeah.
And we have been doing some concession tables at my main school, Constantino, the school this took place at. And the principal there, Rich Poor, has been so, in the whole admin team since I got there, so supportive of the arts, at least vocally. There's not much he can do monetarily to help us out, but for him to sit there and say, like, to the whole community, like, wow, like everybody should come to this concert. We're all so excited for it. It went out in the newsletters without me having to ask him about anything. The administrators all show up to our concerts, they're dancing, and it makes a really big impact on the kids. So I've taken over the jazz band in Haverhill, and it's an all-city middle school jazz band. So that means it's kids from all 4 middle schools that have come together in like such a beautiful way to perform with each other. And even though they might not all have the same background, economically or socially, they all come together for one cause. And it's like a crossover episode every Tuesday when we rehearse. Like, wow, it's so-and-so hanging out with so-and-so. I didn't know you knew each other, or like whatever. It's very sweet. So George was like, I want to do this and I think we can make it work. And I was like, in my time, we haven't had a fundraiser for Haverhill Middle School bands. Let's do it. Let's actually try to put some money into this program so we can have things like, we should have mutes for the brass section for sure. And I think they're at that point now where, even if we just got like plunger heads for the brass players, they're not horribly expensive and it's something that they can all use and start experimenting with. That would be very nice. And to build a music library that is more modern and less like, our jazz band music library is a whole lot of pep band or rock band arrangements.
Okay. Yep.
It's not necessarily what I'm trying to do. Like I want the kids to have not totally authentic, you know what I mean? But because I can only do so much, but
expose them to the kinds of jazz they should hear.
The kind of jazz, yeah, they should hear and that they would be playing if they went forward with their musical careers. So George and I put this together. We decided, okay, my band will play, his band will play. Then we're going to create a mega band and put us all together and play a chart together. Getting to bring my 2 worlds together was just so it was just so gratifying for me. I love everything that I do with the big bands outside of my time at Haverhill Public Schools, and getting to bring a true jazz program to the Haverhill Middle School kids is awesome, and seeing you guys interact with each other was the sweetest.
And as your gang was playing, I can't speak for all of us more life experienced guys who were sitting at the tables in the back of the cafeteria, but I know I was having a grand sweep of time moment. At first, I was flashing back to myself as a 3rd grader when the high school band came to our gym and put on a little concert for us, and I thought it was the loudest and best sound I ever heard live. And I thought, I want to do that, I think. And as I sat there with the Jerry T big band on the floor in front of the raised stage your gang had played on, with the front row of audience literally 6 feet from my nose, and your trombone kiddo is sitting there with his family, and he is not taking his eyes off of any of the jazz that's happening in front of him. I had a time tunnel moment. Like, this kid is playing the role that I played in 1975.
Oh, for sure. The student you're talking about is, he's so sweet. He's, as you said, a trombone player, and my colleague is a trombone player, so he has the benefit of learning from somebody who plays his instrument actually professionally, 100%. And he has just, he's a sixth grader, so over the past year just blossomed into this fabulous trombone player. And I love seeing that from the kids from fifth grade, where they know 5 notes, they know their pentascale, to coming to jazz band, and all of a sudden you're interpreting music. Like, it's huge what they can accomplish in, a year and a half.
And what fun to put the two bands together. Sitting in and amongst, on my left is Beverly, and on my right is Deshawn, and they introduce themselves immediately and demand to know what my name is, and I tell them, and I at least can get a word in edgeways to say, how long have you all been playing? And we're back and forth, and there was the setup, the literal equipment setup took long enough that we actually had a chance to chat back and forth, and I thank them for letting me come and play with them, but it was absolutely a delightful experience.
My kids have so much heart, and I know I've said that before, but they're just so interested as to what the band world could look like for them, I think. One of my main goals coming into this program is I want these kids to know that there's music beyond Haverhill, Massachusetts, and that is what's waiting for them. If they want to pursue this, they can do it. And honestly, and if this is the scope that they end up in, is just, I'm going to play my instrument until I'm a senior in high school, I want it to be the best dang experience that I can give them. So one of the things I did in preparation for this gig is I was talking to my kids about the members of our bands and who they are, because I feel like we play with such characters. Like
that we do.
Kenny is the one that comes to mind in particular, trumpet player, who is a public defender as well. And his stories would blow you away. He's hilarious, and I love to volley with him. But telling the kids about, okay, so you're going to meet Kenny. Anybody who there is to see in the jazz world, you name that person, he has seen that person. He will tell you that he has, exactly when, exactly why. And the kids were just like, that's so cool. Like, he's a walking history book. And I was just so excited that they found the same joy that I found in the members of our band. And when I ever said, I was like, okay, so our trumpet section is Kenny, Larry, George, and Adam, and the kids were like, what are those names? And it's like, I don't know, your names are like Deshawn and Stellan, like they're also not the most I'm sure if I told them your names, they would be like, oh, that's not what our names sound like. Like, the generational divide is so funny. And then also, one of my favorite parts of the gig was so I was talking to George about this, that at yet another rehearsal last night, how we had Stellan, the trumpet player who I mentioned earlier, and he was sandwiched in between. It was George and Larry. And so him and Larry on the chart that we played together took a solo. It was a written out solo at the same time. Larry is regular human size. He's 6 foot, maybe?
He's a tall guy. He's 6 foot and something. I could believe that, yeah.
And Stellan on a good day is like a good 5 feet. And I was like, all right, soloists, stand. And so they stand, and I was like, Stellan, maybe stand on a chair. It was just so cute. And I found one of the papers of our set list from the other day. And on the set list, it's like what we're playing, what the solo form is, and who's taking the solos. And it said Larry and Stellan. And I was like, wait, who's Larry? Oh, yeah, we did that whole thing last week. The thing that dominated my life for like a good, 2 months.
And then as soon as it was over, and there are music teachers that will nod and say, yep, that happens, you crashed hard.
Oh, I crashed so hard. Tuesday was the gig, and Tuesday around 10 a.m. I was like, I kind of have a scratchy throat, but I had to, muscle through it. And then Wednesday hit, and my body just was not able to do it again. I keep saying to my kids, like, Thursday and Friday, I felt like a vampire in a coffin, and I still have a residual cough. What was funny is the other day I went back to Whittier, not the school that the event took place at, but the other one. And I coughed, and then the student next to me coughed the same cough. And I was like, there it is. It was you guys. You're the culprit. But sometimes when you're down and out, you're just down and out as a band director.
You go and go and go because you have to. And as soon as you don't have to anymore.
Yes. Oh my God. The band director urge to be like, you can do it. You can muscle through it. Come on, Lauren. Like, if you're not there, the kids don't have bands is so challenging. And that brings up a whole work-life balance conversation.
How long have you got? A wise person once told me, sometimes no transition is transition. And I'm recalling that at the top of this chat, I teased that we'd talk about your UMass Lowell origin story. And I know at least one person out there who is wondering why I haven't yet. You touched on it briefly, but there's more to the tale, I know.
I was lucky enough to get in 2015. So that was my freshman year. And so my whole undergrad was uninterrupted. COVID hit. It was the year of my master's coursework. So we went into spring break going, we love this cohort. This is so much fun. Like, when else in our lives are we going to be able to hang out with all potential music teachers in one place and talk shop and whatever? And we never came back. And I remember doing Zoom meetings, sitting out on my roof in Lowell, being like, all right, this is the most fresh air I've gotten in a while. And here we are. Do you want to see my garden that I've created in like giant flower pots? Like,
and in the back of your mind thinking, I do not know what the world is going to look like in a moment or a week or a month.
I know. I remember finishing my coursework and it's May 2020. And what was next in, you know, the book of what I was supposed to do was go off and do my student teaching. It did not make sense to do your student teaching fall of 2020. So I ended up taking a gap year. I worked at Joanne Fabrics, taught lessons, had my own Etsy store, cobbled something together to get myself through, and then finally did my student teaching with Adam Costa in Beverly and Scott Rossley out in Lancaster. Just two fabulous experiences. The Beverly band is everything that I would love to model, you know, my teaching off of and more. The professionals are great there. I love the teachers. The kids, just even from day one, just so empathetic, so kind, even coming straight off of COVID. Just so thankful to be playing music together. And that's something that, in a sentiment that I really wanted to bring to my program too. Anyway, getting back to the UMass Lowell of it all. So I have an unconventional story in general of how I got into music teaching. I had a very inspirational middle school band director when I was younger, Mike Giannopolo. He's a saxophone player. He's just a cool guy. You know what I mean? He played jazz. He played tenor sax. I did not understand that being a middle school band director could be a job. I was like, this is just fun all the time. Like, party. And sometimes it's party, not 100% all party. But I always was just like, this is such a joyful place for me to be growing up in. And what if I could bring this throughout my life? And then I went to high school and I was like, okay, but like money exists and I should be a chemical engineer. And so my whole high school career, it was the sciences, taking as many AP classes as I possibly could, preparing myself to one day work in a lab because I just could not stand being around kids in my generation. I don't know what it was, but I just wanted to be a hermit in my own world. As a teenager, I dressed very 1950s, very preppy, had long hair. For those of you that are listening, I now have a buzz cut in like a, what is this thing called? An undercut. An undercut is what I have. But for many years, it was very femme, very different. Anyway, got through high school. At one point, my high school band director said to me, like, you know, Lauren, like, you take private lessons. If you wanted to do this job, you could do this job. And I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then I went to the UMass Lowell band camp that they hold in July, the symphonic band camp. I had graduated from high school. I was straight off of my senior year and I knew I was going to UMass Lowell in the fall. And I picked UMass Lowell because I knew they had a great engineering program, but also I knew that band had to stay a part of my life. And I just didn't realize how much a part of my life it would stay. And I saw the professionals there. And the story I like to tell is I just was like, all of the instructors are so joyful, are so full of life. And as a 18-year-old, I was like, oh, how old are you? They're like, I'm 35. I'm like, oh my God, you look 25. Like you look like you're my age. How are you still so youthful and joyful? And who knows how old these people actually were. In my head, they could have been 50, and I was just like, oh yeah, you're probably 35, like whatever. But I asked them, like, oh, well, how have you guys been able to pull this off? And they were like, well, we do what we love every single day. And for that reason, we feel like we don't work. And I was like, I want that. I want to be immersed in music. And I came to realize in that moment that everything I had ever done was either teaching or was music or was both in some capacity, and that it was what I was meant to do. And my first semester at UMass Lowell changed over. I went to, I think, one chemical engineering class, looked at the people around me, and was like, this is not for me.
Okay. It's for somebody, but just not me.
Oh my goodness. And one of my best friends who I met in marching band at UMass Lowell, Colin, he did the whole chemical engineering major, and now he's a high school chemistry teacher. He found his way back into teaching as well, which is something we connect over. So it's kind of interesting seeing it, secondhand, being like, this is the life that I could have had. And that versus what I was able to do in music school, I was like, it's the right choice. And it always it confirmed for me, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where I'm supposed to be.
So holding tight to that sense, I'm going to toss out my standard set of questions that are less rooted in the resume. So the first one is always, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played, either outdoors or indoors?
For me, it was my freshman year of high school, and I was playing Frank Tikelli, his arrangement of Shenandoah. I was like, wow, music can be everything and more, and was just enamored with his arranging and his composition style. I just felt like my heart was singing. And that was something I don't always have the words that I want to have, but I knew that piece of music could speak. I think the other piece for me, if I could talk on another piece, is Holst's Second Sweden F, which who doesn't mention one of his pieces when they're talking about inspirational wind band stuff? That year we had no euphonium players, so I got to play the euphonium solo on tenor sax, and I was like, this is so cool. It's like everything that my brain wanted to put on paper but didn't have the vocabulary to put on paper.
There's a reason why they still play the second suite.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think too, now the new standard for at least middle school band composing for me is Randall Standridge's works. I love Randall Standridge. He came to NEBDI, NEBDI last summer, and I saw that Randall Standridge was going to be there. I was like, the frogs guy, I'm so excited. I have to go. And my students were like, oh yeah, you have to go. And he's another one. I feel like the word of the week is joyful. He's so joyous in his writing. And I love that he prioritizes that everybody gets the melody. As growing up a saxophone player and playing many a march, even though I love playing a good march, I think you could throw any John Philip Sousa piece in front of me and I would be happy. But having somebody that prioritizes that everybody gets to play melody, that's like game changing, especially in middle school.
Even the trombones.
Even the bones. And I have a strong bone section. I'm so proud of them. One thing that I meant to mention, but I hadn't today, was a lot of my kids, we have a smaller program. We have smaller bands. And I think it's just the nature of the pull-out program and trying to rebuild a new program. And, well, not new, but, post-COVID and when you don't really have the funding and all of that sort of stuff. And so a lot of my kids are 1-2 apart. They're sixth graders playing anything from, they were really great with the 0.5, the 1 stuff. And now we're pushing them to do 1.5s and 2s, and they're 1-2 apart. The amount of work that these kids have to put in to make what they do happen is, I just think, so commendable. they don't have to work as hard as they do, but they show up and they choose to day after day. And that's the special thing about my kids.
Do they realize that being one on a part at that time in their development as musicians is not that common?
I don't think so. I think that they think, yeah, like this is kind of what a band program is. And that's one of the reasons I really want them to see at some point in their lives a big band program. I want them to go off to band camp and interact with other kids and be like, oh, this is another version of what this could be. I want them to have conductors who aren't just myself and Matt Lefton, who we're great, but just having other experiences, as many enriching experiences as you can, that's invaluable to a kid, and to get their ears, invested in anything.
That experience with being the only person playing your part, so you got to play it, that is going to so pay off for them and for the next band director that they have.
I know. They really have to understand. They have to understand their part and exactly how it interacts with all the other parts at a very young age. And
they can't draft behind somebody else.
Right. There's none of that. And it becomes a very special ensemble, I think.
Facing in the other direction, what is there a piece of band music that you have never ever played but you'd like to sometime?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Staying on the same Frank DeKelly train, I've always wanted to play Blue Shades by him. I remember as a high school student, I think it was the district band did it the year prior to me being a freshman in high school. And so we had one of those projects where it's like, pitch a piece of music, maybe we'll play it as a band. And threes were like the toughest thing that we were playing in high school band. So I was like, Frank DeKelly's Blue Shades. And my band director was like, are you crazy? Like, I think you're crazy. So I want to so badly find an ensemble that can handle that piece and park myself in that ensemble and play all the parts. That bass clarinet part is so cool. I'm sure the tenor saxophone part has to be good. If it's not, then I'll eat crow. Fine, but...
All right. Is there a band that you would love to perform with that you haven't, either because you're not the right age or you're not in the right place in the world or don't live in the right time period?
Pipe dream, but Jazz in Lincoln Center is just such a fabulous ensemble. Camille Thurman is the lady who performs with that band. She's tenor saxophone player and singer. She's just fabulous. And somebody that I so look up to, and watching her with that ensemble is like crazy. If only I met her briefly once at Newport Jazz Fest, just was able to wave and say hello and was like, thank you so much, for being who you are and being good representation for us women here in jazz. And so it just meant so much to me because I love seeing myself in places that I don't normally see myself in, I guess. It makes a huge difference for people. I think too, I'd love to play with this is pretty local, but the Compact Big Band. I'd like to play with them sometime. I'd love to play with and I got to when I was in college. I'd like to play again with the Mood Swings Ensemble, the all-female big band. And then there's the other all-female big band that's more big-timey too. The Diva Jazz Orchestra. Crazy ensemble. Love them. I need to practice more. But really, I think the box answer is I just want to be in a room where I'm the worst player anywhere I go.
Well, it was great to have you jump on board to chat. Again, particularly considering that you were, I'm going to say 8 hours ago, I would predict you were not exactly in a condition to do it.
Oh my goodness. Having migraines is relatively new for me, and yeah, making it through the first 2 periods of the day, I was like, okay, great, I can teach flute. And then we got to the saxophone, so my body was like, we cannot do this anymore. We need the restroom, we need the nurse's office, all of that sort of stuff. But I'm just so glad that I was able to sit down and do this. I've been looking forward to being on this podcast for such a long time. As soon as you said, do you want to be on a podcast? It was like, I love to yap.
Perfecto.
I always say, for teaching, it's like teaching's perfect for me because I have a captive audience and they have to listen to me no matter what.
With that in mind, this is going to be even funnier. Middle school music teacher, baritone saxophonist, reformed hermit, Lauren SLIVA. Thanks again, and may you find continued success and happy weekend.
Oh, thank you. And a strong, happy weekend to you too.
Okay, after this short break, I've got a story for you which is something of a love letter to a dome.
What?
This is BandWagon. Here comes the dogfight. In this week's dogfight, some musings. During the time I've been associated with bands and school music and such, I've been fortunate to experience a few big stage moments, although assuredly I was not the absolute center of attention in any of them. I got to march in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City while I was a grad assistant with the Boston University Band. During my freshman year with the UMass Band, I was in Washington, D.C. for President Reagan's second inauguration, and I've talked about that experience here recently. The couple of years when I was assistant manager and then manager of the Massachusetts All-State Band, the band's performance was in Symphony Hall in Boston, so I not only got to stand on the Symphony Hall stage, I got to adjust the positioning of a couple of chairs. Ooh. So honestly, even if I never get to do anything remotely like any of that again, it's okay. Those memories are mine as long as my memory lasts. But of all the visits to great big stuff, to venues that either hosted big events or were themselves iconic monuments to whichever activity was taking place within them, I feel like the oddest ones were the buildings that were home to professional sports teams, but which were hosting postseason athletic tournament games. The arenas themselves were not odd. They were anywhere from decent-sized gyms to massive dome stadiums, and they were perfectly well-designed, constructed, maintained. But I don't know, somehow they felt odd. For openers, they were not our team's home arenas, so of course everything was a little different, or a lot. Of course we had to turn around 360 degrees several times just to get a sense of where we were, never mind where we needed to be, or where the bathrooms were. Maybe I'm making this up, but I doubt it. I mean, you might be able to confirm or deny this, but there's something about the atmosphere, almost literally the air, in most of those places. Oftentimes, I found it a little difficult to judge distances, particularly inside the larger stadiums. The colors were just a little different. Even our team's uniform colors seemed, well, as if someone had knocked the world's tint control just a little out of whack. Not to brag, but here is a pretty comprehensive list of the indoor facilities I've visited with various pep bands, largely from northeast in the U.S. to southwest. The Fleet Center in Boston, which is now the TD Garden. Agganis Arena, home to the Boston University hockey teams. The Worcester Centrum, which is now the DCU Center, but it'll always be the Centrum. The Mullins Center, home to the UMass Amherst basketball and hockey teams. The Springfield Civic Center, been there a couple times. The Knickerbocker Arena in Albany, New York. Soika Pavilion, hope I'm pronouncing that right, is home to the Bucknell University basketball teams. Daskalakis Athletic Center, home to the Drexel University basketball teams, and man, is that a tough place to play. The Bob Carpenter Center, home to the University of Delaware basketball teams. The Bryce Jordan Center, home to the Penn State basketball teams. The Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati. That was where last week's Michigan hockey band Bullwinkle story happened, and that national semifinal game from the story was when the Michigan goal was first scored. That's the one where the player flips the puck up onto the blade of his stick and sticks the puck in the net like he's playing lacrosse. That one. Anyway, Kemper Arena in Kansas City, where I saw that University of Tulsa mascot. And the Indianapolis RCA Dome, which used to be the Hoosier Dome and has since been succeeded by some podunk barn called Lucas Oil Stadium. I don't know. That last one is the one that I mourn. I had a history with that joint, and they knocked it over. My first time there, in late 1993, the UMass Marching Band famously made its first visit to Indianapolis to perform in exhibition at the Bands of America Grand National Championships. It was my first time inside an indoor professional football stadium, and it was weird. The lighting, as distributed and reflected by the fabric of the inflatable roof, was just a tiny bit bluish and seemed a little dimmer than I was expecting. It was hard to judge exactly how high the roof actually was, with few or no reference points, and the acoustics were, shall we say, not exactly Boston Symphony Hall, but I think because UMass was rocking the house, it didn't bother me overly. The other time I got there was toward the end of my first year as athletic band director at the College of the Holy Cross, which is a band time in my life that I haven't talked about nearly as much as I need to here on the podcast, since it was a glorious 4 years spent at a wonderful place working with genuinely lovely band people, and I will rectify that oversight very shortly. 54 episodes in, and I haven't really talked about the Good Time Marching Band? I got to work on that. Anyway, the occasion was the first round of the big dance. The Holy Cross men had won their conference tournament and earned a place in the 2003 NCAA tournament in Indianapolis as a number 14 seed. You heard right, a 14 seed coming out of the Patriot League. The guys were set to play the number 3 seed, Marquette University, and with all due respect, Holy Cross was not supposed to win. We made it close. We frankly gave them a scare. We only lost 72-68. And, fun fact, our two schools' fight songs were the same tune. I didn't think anybody had our fight song as well, but we were both Jesuit schools, so who knows. But we didn't realistically have much of a chance of staying in Indy for more than a single overnight, which worked out well because the Holy Cross women also won their conference tournament that year and were headed to Penn State to play in the women's NCAA tournament first round. And since our pep band roster was not big enough to field 2 separate bands, we were going to have to find our way there 2 days after the men's first round. I kind of was and was not rooting for the guys, if you catch my drift, because the entire Holy Cross band staff, responsible for musical and logistical coordination and execution, was housed inside my little self. And the story from going from the men's game to the women's game is one I shall tell, but not now. Instead, I will tell the story of the Holy Cross band getting to Indianapolis and the sentence that I whispered to one of my band kids, which amazed me even as I whispered it. To make a long story very, very short, the Holy Cross pep band flew from Bradley International Airport in Hartford, Connecticut, to Indianapolis, dumped our belongings in our hotel, and took a bus over to the RCA Dome to sit and watch the Holy Cross men's basketball practice session. As we entered the cavernous expanse of the dome, which made the basketball court placed near where the 50-yard line would have been look exceptionally insignificant, 29 out of the 31 of us looked around and up in varying states of awe and wonderment. 2 of us did not. I looked over at one of our mellophonists, Lauren, and she looked at me, and I said to her quietly, "It's good to be back." And Lauren said, "Yep." She said that, instead of looking at me like I was certifiably bananas, because she had been to this venue before as well. She had marched with the King Philip Regional High School Marching Band from down here in southeastern Massachusetts when they competed in the Bands of America Grand National Championships there at the RCA Dome a few years previously. I don't think anyone else in the band heard that remark, which was okay too. Lauren and I got to share a brief, unobtrusive moment of flashback. We'd each been on this particular big stage before, in front of many thousands of people. 24 hours later, the whole Holy Cross band would be able to make that claim to some degree. But in that moment, Lauren and I, by ourselves, shared a slightly weird feeling of familiarity with the joint. And for the next hour, we sat watching our men's hoop team practice on a court that simultaneously was right over there and seemed 1,000 miles away, and making sneaker squeaking and basketball bouncing sounds that were both crisply clear and slightly muffled, in lighting that was just a little more bluish than you might expect and a little dimmer than you might expect, inside a building whose roof seemed both within reach and a parsec away, a building that was meant for football, not for basketball, a building which was not really meant for drum corps and was definitely not built to help a little pep band sound, a building which was hundreds of miles from campus and yet felt like home away from home for a couple of us. Pep band is such a weird sport sometimes. Okay, one last pause to catch our breath, and then we'll wrap things up for this week. Thanks, as always, for continuing to listen. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, one more pithy quote for you. Yeah, another one. If you're a band person on social media, you are very likely to have seen posts with quotes from Vaughan Fleischfresser. Aside from having one of the best names in music education, he is an Australian living in Edinburgh, Scotland. He is a freelance saxophonist. He holds undergraduate degrees in music and education from the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia, and he holds a Master of Music Education degree from Vandercook College of Music in Chicago, where he majored in wind band and choral education. And he's taught music at all levels throughout Australia, the UK, and North America. So, qualifications. Here's the quote. "When you join a music ensemble, you join a family. It doesn't matter your age, your stage, your instrument, or where in the world you are, music ensembles provide an instant connection, an instant support mechanism, an instant musical family. Music families are special families. It's been true all along. It's still true now. It's particularly true and may well be actively useful now, I think. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at the pod's website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using the email address heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that I do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to this week's news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Lauren SLIVA, can be found in our show notes, as can a link to BandWagon's merch store, thanks to the good folks at TeePublic. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, please do share it in the direction of someone whom you think might not be a listener yet. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with the pod every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton, and remember, hang up your uniform when you get home.